Welcome to The Law Matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program has been created to educate, inform, and help you with the law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better and you're in a better position to help yourself, your family, and your business. We continue to provide information and resources that will help you decide whether or not you need to contact a lawyer. Perhaps will help you determine that you might actually be able to handle some issues yourself. If you do need professional counsel, you'll be better prepared, and as a result, so will those who you select. Either way, our goal always is to help you save time, money, and achieve better results. On a continuing basis, our lawyer, David Bazar, continues to help us as we tackle various topics of the day, East Providence based. And with us today, we both would like to welcome our guest, attorney Roberto Gonzalez. And as I understand, your law practice primarily focuses on issues about immigration as well as Social Security, business, workers' compensation, personal injury, etc. So today as we begin, our topic will be immigration. It's a timely topic for certain, sure. The laws, deportation, reform, from the DACA to DAPA, and what those acronyms stand for. And some real life stories that, of course, our attorneys will be sharing with you. We want to cover what you need to know today. And, of course, as of this taping, President Trump's first address to Congress, and he did tackle that issue. Is it really a new and promising day? Maybe we'll be able to cover some things about green cards and naturalization. Anyway, the topic is complicated, it's controversial, it's been politicized, and we know it affects the economy, the workforce, and also families. So let's get to it. Before we get into the real problems, if you could, Counselor, please give us a little bit of an overview about how that immigration process happens.
So people come to the United States, and obviously if they were born in the United States, they're citizens, so that they wouldn't have an immigration issue. But if they come to the United States, they usually will come with a visa that allows them to remain here for some period of time. Visas are usually temporary in nature and for a specific purpose. So for example, you come as a visitor, you have to leave by a certain date, usually 6 months. Some people come with work visas, and while they're working, while the job is available to them, they're here with authorization. Other people cross the border usually because they are under some bad conditions back home. Either they're being persecuted or economically they can't make ends meet, and they may have family that is starving or in hard times. So they come to the United States looking for employment so they can send money back home. The people that come with visas, if they overstay their visa, they're essentially in this country without authorization and are subject to deportation. The people that come in crossing the border, for the moment they cross the border, are here without authorization, and unless the government gives them some type of temporary permission to be here, they are also subject to deportation. As you said, immigration is a complex area of law. There are many programs, there are many rules, regulations that immigration lawyers must know in order to help people who come to them. Usually a typical case for me is someone that's coming that they want to become legal. No one wants to be in this country without status. I mean, you can't get a driver's license, you don't have a social security number. So it's everyone's desire to get their status fixed so that they can work and remain here legally.
Just a quick question, if you can address this, please. Is everyone eligible? What are the eligibility issues here?
Well, that is the key question. There are programs that some people may qualify. For example, if a person comes into this country and they marry a U.S. citizen, then they may qualify to get a permanent resident status based on that marriage. However, if they came into the country illegally through the border, crossing it at night, someplace where there isn't an immigration official doing an inspection, then that person has to actually leave the United States. They're subject to a 10-year bar before they can come back legally. And that's the problem, that there aren't adequate remedies for people to become legal. So you may have, for example, a parent, and I see this a lot of cases that I get, a parent may have brought their children to the United States without status. In other words, they paid someone to smuggle them across the Mexican border. And now their children have grown up, and the children now want to go to work, and they like to get a driver's license, and they can't, because there's no way for that child to become legal. Under President Obama, we had a very special program called DACA.
Which stands for?
Which stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And under that program, children who came to the United States before the age of 16, who haven't committed any crimes and are applying before they turn 30 years old can get their permanent residence. I'm sorry, not permanent residence. I take that back before you get people calling the program. They get it's kind of a special permission to remain in this country, but it's not permanent.
So that's why they call it deferred action, because they're saying, if you go through the program, we will not take any action to remove
against you. That's correct, right. And there are a couple of other deferred action type of programs that.
Such as DAPA, the deferred action for the parental?
Right. So DAPA was another similar program to DACA, but that one got challenged in the courts in Texas, and the courts in Texas put it on hold. And so that program, no one has been able to benefit from that program as of now.
Now, in the marriage situation, if you married someone who was here without authorization, if they left and then you filed the application, would that be a better way to do it, or is it better to try to do it while they're still here? How does that work?
Yeah, so the law says that if you were here in any kind of unlawful status for more than 180 days, you are subject to this 10-year bar. Mm-hmm. So it's not really going to matter if the person leaves and then you apply. They're still subject to that bar, and they still have to wait. Now, there is a waiver for that bar. So, for example, if the U.S. citizen spouse can show that he would suffer extreme hardship, and they really mean extreme, then they would waive the 10-year bar and allow the person to come back. But the person would still have to leave the country, undergo what they call consular processing, which is an interview at the American Embassy abroad, and then that person would be able to come back.
Is that what they're referring to when they label family reunification? If someone's been sent back and wants to return and it's too long a process, do they expedite it in that case when they ask for a waiver, for example?
Well, yes, the program is based on the concept of family reunification. In fact, many of the immigration programs are either based on employment or family reunification, keeping families together. So this is a program that's designed to allow families to remain together.
So I understand that there's actually a dip in the amount of immigrants that are coming in. Apparently, it says since 2012, 484,000 new legal entries, 11.5 million illegal reside today, but the trend in the past few months has been that it's down. Some part of that, I guess, they note, is because it's winter time, but what do you find?
No, that is correct. In the last, I would say, 7 years, we have seen a slight drop in the number of people coming into the country without authorization across the border with Mexico. And in fact, where Mexicans were the largest group that were coming into the country without status, that's no longer true. There's more people going back, more Mexicans going back to Mexico than actually border crossers coming into the country. And so that calls into question whether or not we really need that wall between the United States and Mexico.
As lawyers, do you see people who come to you because they are more that come to you because they want to become legal if they ended up falling through the net, so to speak, or they're in trouble and they want you to stave off the ultimate, meaning deportation? How does that affect either of you?
Yeah. So we get people coming in because either they want to apply for their green card, and they have a qualifying relative who can do the petition and get them status. And then we have the litigation end of immigration, which is where people are placed in deportation proceedings, which are judicial proceedings in a federal administrative court. The local one here is in Boston, and where they have to, represent get a lawyer to represent them in front of the judge. The government is represented by the government's lawyers, and they're literally fighting to stay in this country and avoid a deportation.
We've had cases like that we would send to Roberto, and then there are cases where people are trying to stay, but they're also saying, what can I do to protect my children who were born here if I get deported? And so we've been working with those people to try to do different things. I've been having them create powers of attorney to appoint somebody here to do what they could do if they were here, perhaps even sign guardianship papers in advance. Hopefully they'll never need them, but that somebody can be appointed as guardian over the children if they're deported eventually.
So once upon a time there was a discussion about sponsors when someone would come from another country. What's the status of that, and does that apply today if someone is likely to be deported and has an underage child? Can a sponsor be such a person who would take care of that underage child?
Yeah, if the sponsor is the person who has guardianship, then that person can be, can take care of the child. What I think David's talking about is that we have a lot of mixed families in this country. So you may have one of the parents may be undocumented, but the spouse maybe is a U.S. citizen, and they may have 3 or 4 U.S. citizen children. Right. So often when we talk about sending them back home, we're actually affecting that whole family unit. And so, if we happen to have a family where both parents are undocumented, but they have a few U.S. citizen children, those children have the right to remain here. And so what we often do is what David was talking about, which is, create documents, legal documents, so that someone can stay behind and take care of those children. But it has to be someone that's legal. Right. Someone who has, permanent residence or is a U.S. citizen. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to give them power over your children. Right. And we also encourage people to get powers of attorney done. So, they may have a bank account, they may own a house, a car, and, if all of a sudden they find themselves, being deported, they need to leave someone behind who can handle their affairs.
So you try to help people do it properly and get them in to the right place, the right time, and it takes time. So, of course, we know the very contentious issue is mass deportation, whether or not that's actually going to happen. So what actually do you think the current risk is of the undocumented families being deported? We've talked a little bit about the DAPA and DACA. Is there really likely to be a kinder, gentler President Trump or Congress or reforms? What's your thought about that these days?
I'm going to look into my crystal ball for this.
That's exactly right.
It's so hard to really figure out what is going to happen. I mean, we hear an administration talking from both ends. On one end they say that they're going to be tough and that they're going to deport. And in fact, they issued an executive order which pretty much said anyone who's in this country undocumented, whether or not they've committed a crime, can be subject to deportation. So you may fall into the deportation system because some official picked you out of a crowd, and asked you for your papers, and you didn't have papers, and now all of a sudden you're there. Or, you may be working in a company and immigration may go in and do what they call a worksite raid where they go in and ask everybody for papers, and all of a sudden, you know, if you don't have papers, you may fall into that immigration deportation trap. So if that's what this administration plans to do, then you know, we will see mass deportations. We'll see the kinds of raids that we were seeing back in the early 2000s, where they were going into companies like Bianco here in New Bedford and dragging 350 people out at a time, or some of the big meat packing companies out in the Midwest where they were bringing out 500 and 600 people at a time. And that would be a very disruptive and very painful, especially to those mixed families that we're talking about. We had situations back then, and I'll never forget, David, when we were in the same office, I had a father come in with a toddler, and the toddler cried the entire time, at the top of his lungs, the entire time that he was in my office. And I asked him, what's wrong with the child? And he says, well, he's breastfeeding, and mom just got picked up and shipped out to the Texas border where they're going to deport her tomorrow. So those are the kinds of real difficult situations that we were seeing back then, and we'll probably see again if this administration decides to get really tough on this population. And
do you find that people are actually scared still?
Oh, absolutely. I get probably a dozen calls a day. I just can't keep up with them, of people that are, you know, full of anxiety, full of fear, and they want to know, you know, what can I do? What should I be doing? What's going to happen? If anything, the fear is real. It's there.
It's so early in this administration to know exactly how they're going to roll out whatever changes they want to make to Obama's policies and plans, that people are very anxious about that. As Roberto was saying, they don't have to have any reason, according to that executive order, to pick somebody up. And it used to be that the only ones, and I've even heard President Trump say this on occasion, we want to deport those who have committed the serious crimes. Right. And that was always sort of the case. It's, you know, the felonies, even the misdemeanors weren't as big a deal, although if it was domestic related or something like that, it could be. But it was really always the criminals. And then if it filters down to you get pulled over for a speeding ticket, and now we find that you're not here with correct status, that they want the police to be able to hold it so that an ICE officer can come and get them. That could create real problems and real hardships for the mixed families and other people who are depending on these people who are here and trying to be productive citizens of the country.
And I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I get a lot of calls from employers too that are worried about their help. Employers who say, you know, listen, I have this person working for me, and he's the best worker I have, and I can't possibly replace him, and I know he's undocumented, and I know that I can get in trouble for having him, but I can't find a suitable replacement for this person.
How do you counsel them? What do you say to that employer? Because that's another issue. What does the employer do to not promote trouble or welcome it?
Well, usually the employers call them because they want to know what they can do to help this person become, get legal status in this country, get their green card.
What can they do?
Well, that's the problem. There is nothing that the employer can do if the person is already here in undocumented status.
The other side of what Roberto does, you know, is the companies that do want to bring someone in, and they'll contact Roberto. I know you did a lot of work for Brown University at one point in time, and others.
Right. So for those employers that are bringing in foreign nationals from abroad, like Brown University bringing in a world-renowned researcher who's working on a remedy for some illness, there are avenues to do that. Or for the Microsoft companies of the world that want to bring software engineers, as long as the person they're bringing in is outside the country and hasn't been here in undocumented status. But the people that are here and already have violated, that walked across the border and therefore an undocumented status, the employer cannot help those people.
You brought up another very interesting point about that, because when I opened up and asked about the eligibility issue, apparently there was a time when people would say, we're opening our borders to bring in those who have skills that we require here. Well, on the other side of that, when Microsoft and I believe Google said we don't have enough people here who have the STEM, the science and technology and math skills, so we want to bring someone in, and that's a viable reason. The other side of that became contentious apparently is that there were a couple of companies, remaining nameless at the moment, who just did it to undercut the cost or have cheap labor imported, which was certainly something that presidents, not just Trump, but others would say, we really don't. We want to help employ our own people. But of course, does it still stand that if you have someone who wants to come into this country and has a very unique set of skills, do they go to the head of the line, or are they just part of the process?
Yes, and we have it's a system of priorities based on the skill set that the person has. So if you have someone that's really outstanding, they might be in the first preference. Someone who is for example, advanced degree holder, they might be in the second preference. And then you have people who just have maybe a bachelor's degree, they would fall into the third. And then you have the last categories, other workers who don't necessarily have any special skills, but they will fill a hard to fill position here in the United States. And the employer would have to actually prove to the Department of Labor that person, that he can't find a suitable person to do that job.
Wasn't there some requirement for sort of advertising?
Yes.
And showing that you made efforts to bring
recruit,
somebody in?
right.
Yeah, I remember. And I also remember one case you had, was it a karate or chess expert?
Yes.
What was that one?
Yeah, that was a chess master. There was actually a family, I don't know if you
Right,
remember,
I do
of
remember.
three, a father and two of his children, and they were all chess masters from El Salvador. And we were able to get them their green cards based on their abilities.
So how would this apply to, for example, the fast food chains who say they can't get a worker to work at the current level that they're offering for wages, but if they import someone, those people from other countries are willing to work at that nominal, very low wage where people in our country won't? What do you say to that? Is that a legitimate thing? It's certainly not a unique skill set.
Yeah, it's very difficult for an employer to bring in a foreign worker for a position that doesn't have a special skill set, or doesn't, or the employer can't prove that there aren't sufficient workers capable of doing that job. So when you have a job that doesn't require certain skills, it's the Department of Labor will say to the employer, well, why can't you just hire anyone and give them some training and do it? And I think that's a very legitimate response to them. But the employer would like to bring in a foreign national who he could pay the minimum, and then when he doesn't need them, send them back home. So it's complicated, to say the least.
Yeah, it would seem for most of the employment situations, you either have an employer that has some special needs that they can't fill easily or at all. And I remember, I think we had one where a school wanted a teacher who could teach Spanish as his natural language, but also to bring in the cultural aspects that he was teaching as part of that. And I think you were able to get
Yes.
status for that person as well.
Right, that's right.
Let's address cost for a moment. Considering that there are people who need to have representation as they're going through the process, whether they're trying to do the usual or they're trying to avoid deportation, I can imagine they might not all be of the highest level and especially skilled set where their wages are astronomical. How do you address the fact that there's certainly need, but is it costly and as well as time consuming to handle these immigration issues such as they are?
It can be. Some of these cases take a long time. The employment cases, for example, you're dealing with several government agencies, not just the Immigration Service, but also the Department of Labor and a couple of other agencies in between. When you're dealing with deportation cases, you're trekking up to Boston. These cases are now taking 4 and 5 years to get resolved, and you usually, will go maybe two or three times a year to report, to the judge on the progress of the case. So they can be very complex and time-consuming.
And if someone is in this process, does that stave off their possible deportation if they're in the queue to have this being taken care of the way it should be? If it takes 5 years, could someone pull the rug and say it's time for you to go now, in medias res, in the middle of that?
So the answer to that is no, and that's because, even if you're here in undocumented status, you do have due process rights. And because you have due process rights, you have the right to have a judge determine your fate. And if that's going to take 4 or 5 years, you have the right to remain here. And immigration couldn't just pick you up and deport you without violating your due process rights.
Encouraged, David, these days?
Well, I think it's the whole where we're going is still unfolding. So I rely on people like Roberto, who knows this area and how it's unfolding and what can be done and what can't be done. We've gone through ups and downs with this as administrations have changed. I know that with President Obama, there was a lot of hope that we could straighten out the whole immigration problem with a heart that would go out to the people with the mixed families, with the DACA program and that type of thing. And it still remains to be seen how this actually gets rolled out. So I'm waiting, and I don't have the crystal ball, so I'm just waiting to see.
Are you encouraged, Roberto?
Well, I'm very, I'm trying to keep a realistic outlook here. And, I want to see actions before I can judge this new administration on what its intentions are. And so far, what I have seen indicates that they want to, at the very least, appease their base by being tough, by appearing to be very tough. I think realistically, can they build that wall? Can they deport almost 12 million people over the next 4 or 5 or 6 years? No, I don't think it's realistic to deport that mass of people without, I think affecting not only our prices with agricultural products in this country, but also, our moral standing in the world.
Well, David, Attorney Gonzalez, we thank you. We hope that you found this helpful and interesting, and we urge you to stay tuned to the Law Matters and in our next segment, because the law matters to you.